Members of committee, we are now live.
Okay, thank you, Julia. I guess we'll now call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting this morning. We are, I guess, subject to the regular rules and procedures of virtual meetings. I won't go through it all. I think we've all heard it probably more times than we'd like to hear it. I presume the roll call's been taken?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, there are no delegations this morning. We do have one item for consideration, which is 4.1, development application review process. Can I get a mover and seconder to get that on the floor? Moved by John, seconded by Dan. Okay, it's on the floor, and I believe, Todd, were you going to speak to this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is that a presentation wasn't deemed necessary, but I stand ready to answer any questions of clarification or inquiries from members of the task force.
Appreciate that. Having said that, are there questions from any of the members? Seeing none, you've got an easy morning.
Thank
Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Happens a lot. Todd, when will we expect that we're going to be talking about a process coming back in December before we actually have a process to move forward to get things moving here?
Councillor, I defer to staff to answer any questions of clarification about how they want to move forward. Our final report has been submitted. It's been rigorously stress tested with staff for factual accuracy and appropriateness. You'll recall that we brought an earlier draft of the report forward to this task force. We listened carefully, and we have done our utmost to reflect those comments and feedback that we got. So I would defer to staff on the process or how they want to move the report forward.
Is there a member of staff would like to respond?
Nicole, do you want that or you want me to take it?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Steve. Good morning, Chair Celeste and members of the task force. So just with regards to your question, Councillor Carpenter, in terms of next steps, what you have before you today is the final review report of the development approvals process review. Next steps will be to bring this report to Committee of the Whole Community Development in November for endorsement. And then following that, we will be looking at moving rather quickly in order to bring forward a series of next steps and reports. The first one being is that the report before you does make several recommendations with respect to staffing resources. So there is direction contained in this report that will be presented to Committee of the Whole as well to bring forward an HR report that will address the staffing needs and considerations that are outlined in this report. And then following that, we will be coming forward with a fulsome implementation plan to address the many prioritized recommendations that are included in the report that was prepared by Performance Concepts. There are a series of prioritized recommendations around implementation to improve our development approvals process. So now staff will need to take those recommendations, review the prioritization, and then present an action plan on how we can implement the recommendations contained in the report.
Okay, and of course, this is the result of the KPMG report. So hopefully we're going to have this implemented before the end of at least 2022.
So with respect to the report that will be coming forward, you're absolutely right. I think that this report in some ways is almost a part two or a continuation of the KPMG report. So now what is before us is we need to sort of marry the two reports and take into considerations the recommendations that were made through the KPMG report, what's been done with those, how they are addressed in this DAP report, and then how we'll proceed with implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there further questions? Oh, Councillor McCurry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see in the document that we have a number of what appear to be roadmaps. They appear to be internal use documents. Is there a parallel sort of document that tells applicants exactly what they have to do when they have to do it?
Mr. Chairman, I'll assume for a moment, if it's appropriate, that question was directed towards me. at Performance Concepts. I would note that the city already had fairly well-developed instruction-based manuals for site plan and other application categories. We have built on and augmented those with new as-should-be processes. So those existing instruction manual type support documents will have to be revised and updated to reflect the new as-should-be processes. But I'm confident that staff understand that and are able to execute that on a timely basis.
So is that a next step, Nicole?
Yeah, if I could just add to that response, that was great, Todd. Thank you. So with respect to the implementation, you're right, Councillor McCreary, that the majority of the report is really directed at improvements to internal processes. That will automatically result in a change in the way that essentially in a change that we are doing business, right? We're going to change the way that we're doing business, whether that be through technological improvements, process improvements, and then changes in staffing and likely organization. As we roll those changes out, we will need to have a series of communications, whether it be online or through public information sessions and so on, to inform our customers, essentially the development community, on the changes of our processes. So that is a next step. We need to get sort of our house in order first, and then we will likely communicate how that will change processes for the development community, hopefully for the better.
So for instance, if I wanted to move a heritage house, currently we seem to be learning as we go, both in terms of staff and the client. So the next time we move a heritage house, can I expect that we'll have a checklist and a flow chart for folks to proceed through that process?
I think that that's a reasonable request. I would say that you're absolutely right. We're learning as we go. I don't think staff in this corporation, moving a heritage house is not something that is done often, definitely not in this community. So I think that once we get this house safely moved into its new location, I think we would be able to say that we have the experience in order to provide guidance next time around.
So are we setting deadlines for our production of these type of documents, so that people will fully understand what they have to do and when they have to do it in all respects, not just with the example I cited?
That will be part of the implementation strategy, yes.
Okay. Now, much of what we're doing here appears to be about adding people and spending money. What, if anything, have we undertaken with respect to the KPMG report already?
Through the chair, I can hop in and talk about some of the things. Actually, I think the biggest thing that we've accomplished as part of this review is we've been working really closely with Performance Concepts team in order to get a back-end technology system, use our Amanda software across the planning department. And Councillor McCreary, back to your question around the timelines, each of the stages, that's going to be a really critical piece to help us understand how long it takes us to get through each of the stages of the application and be transparent with the customer about how long they can anticipate it's going to take. So that Amanda piece is a really key piece of this moving forward. And there's been a lot of really big gains with that work. So the plan is to have everything automated, certainly through 2022, so that all of our processes are working through the Amanda system instead of manual processes. That's a big piece from the KPMG work as well.
Okay, but my question is there anything that we have actually implemented that arose from the KPMG report? Anything whatsoever? I'm talking little things now, Steve, you know, like somebody not having to handle a piece of paper twice, or, you know, not having to go back and forth. Anything at all that the staff can cite that we have done out of that first report that's made a difference to what we do?
I see Gary.
Don't be afraid to say I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, Gary Peaver, Manager of Development Engineering, to you, Councillor McCreary. One of the things that development engineering has, I'm going to say, implemented and also started working on a larger level is the site alteration bylaw. So the bylaw itself and the procedures, we are we're, like I say, in the early stages. We've got new legal staff, a new position was acquired, and they're working diligently on that. But in the background, we have implemented the Amanda software in a much more detailed orientation with the site alteration permit itself. So we're actually tracking more when the permits go out. We've already done that. We've been doing that over, I'm going to say, the past year during the pandemic. Just because, again, the paper, like you said, the paper double handling, that is now being implemented and being used today.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, to supplement Mr. Peever's comments and those of Steve Babcock, one of the deliverables Performance Concepts was tasked with was to build a site plan proof of concept, modernized Amanda solution. When Bruce Peever and KPMG did their work, they referenced multiple times the need for streamlining through automation. That product has been built and delivered as part of our review. So there is a modernized site plan information solution that has been handed over as part of the work and is ready for go live incorporation into the city's Amanda environment moving forward.
Okay, so let me ask a couple of specific questions then. I hear from small developers that the site plan document is 32 pages long. Is that true? And is it still 32 pages long or thereabouts?
Through the chair to Councillor McCreary, are you referring to the site plan control manual, Councillor?
I don't know. Joe, you'll know better what the name of the document is that the contractor refers to, and you know who the contractor is too. So
sure,
if you
and
just respond to that.
Maybe if I could just give a brief response to your first question too. So planning staff has been proactive in implementing some of those KPMG items that were mentioned, as well as what has been discussed through our consultation with Performance Concepts in Dillon. So some of that has already transpired. As you know, council approved our delegation of approval authority bylaw amendment this past Tuesday, which is going to very much streamline the work that staff does and the approval process that needs to get out the door for those developers and contractors to start moving towards their construction and phasing. So that's one real, although may not sound like a big one, is a big one for us. We don't have to continuously bring, I would say, redundant staff reports to council's attention when everything can be done internally. So we see a lot of improvement there. We've done some minor tweaks and whatnot to our processes as well. And internally, we've been tracking a lot of our applications in a lot more detail in the absence of not having the Amanda module that Mr. McDonald has already referenced in his response. So, we're doing the best we can. Part of that, and it comes out, is about, staffing. We do have a huge complement of files that, that we are getting, not only in the internal, infill type developments, but a lot that are anticipated and consultations that are happening in the expansion lands too. And I think that comes through in Mr. McDonald's report as well. With respect to the site plan control manual, that is actually in our work process for next year. We are planning to update that document. It is a 2015 document with not many revisions to that. I think there's also a notice of motion in front of this task force today that speaks to security. So that's something that's within the site plan control manual that we will be updating and revising accordingly to address some of the items that we heard through the KPMG study and what we've heard from the development industry as a whole. So those are things that are on the work plan for next year, Councillor.
That's good. Thank you very much, Joe. One last question, if I may, Mr. Chair. If I'm a small developer coming in the front door now, do I still have to go to multiple departments, like one for my building permit and one for my site alteration permit? Or do we have one point of contact that looks after everything for the customer?
To the chair, I can answer that. No, that is still, I'm going to say, 2 points. And if they have to go through a planning application, that would be 3 different points of meeting city staff, but it is very dependent on what they are trying to achieve.
So what's our target date to eliminate that kind of redundancy for the customer and have a single point of contact coming in the door?
To the chair, I'll try to speak to that there. I don't know if a timeline's been fully set. That is something as we're going through the staff review and understanding what the next steps are. I think that's what city staff are now going away and looking at when it comes to staffing and organization and items like that.
I would mention through you, Mr. Chair, as a supplementary comment from a performance concepts point of view, we have built out a review and a technology plan that doesn't require anyone to ever come through the door. So the idea is using the upcoming development approvals portal and the modernized workflow tool that your small developer applicant can submit his applications at 7 o'clock at night after a hard day out in the field, and that the process will be automated, that they won't be required to come through the door. The Amanda workflow tool will notify them, for instance, at a certain point in the progress of their site plan process. Okay, the drawbridge is down. You can now apply for your overlapping building permit application at a certain point in site plan. And the idea is to offer an automated, modernized opportunity to interact with the city in the 21st century that doesn't require multiple trips to City Hall.
Thank you. Come through the door was not intended strictly literally.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Utley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to build on what Councillor McCurry just asked, and that is, do we see, and it's through you, Mr. Chair, to Todd and to Nicole, but are we looking at a one-size-fits-all process for SPA and SPC, or will there be separate processes for small, medium, and large developments and builders?
Through the chair to the councillor, we are definitely looking at a variety of sort of concepts with respect to our site plan process. It has been recognized that the process does seem overly complicated for sort of different levels of builders within our community. We often hear issues or complaints around even those smaller infill developments that were required to go through basically the same process that a large scale development would be required to go through. So those are definitely things that we're looking at. One of the issues, though, that we still struggle with is even some of those smaller developments do have issues around compatibility that often make its way to councillors' ears or even onto the council floor with respect to those infill type developments. So one of the things that we're working on is that we're looking at ways that through our new zoning bylaw, we may be able to address some of these issues around compatibility, do it through zoning, and then eliminate some of those processes through site plan. So those are definitely things that we're looking at. And then, as Todd mentioned, streamlining that process through an automated service, and then also developing areas where certain projects may be further exempt from that process. So it is a complicated issue, and we want to make sure that when we're looking at it in a way that isn't going to create additional problems that are going to find their ways to the council floor because maybe we look to eliminate or streamline a process. So we're looking at the improvement across the board, but a one size fits all, I don't think is probably reasonable or the approach that we're going to be taking, because the developments aren't really one size fits all, if that helps answer your question.
It does. Thank you very much. And I'm interested with the outcome of that discussion as well. And I think it's incumbent upon members of this task force to try and provide some of the concerns, if you don't know already, from from those small, medium, and large developers. Very much interested in working in tandem with staff and with the business community. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question on 4.1. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Consent items, we have one, 21 Hill Ave site alteration permit chronologically. Can I get a mover and seconder for 5.1? Councillor McCurry. We have a seconder? Councillor Utley. Okay, it's on the floor. Any discussion? And Councillor McCurry has his hand up.
Thank you to staff for preparing the report. The report is mute with respect to the circumstance that arose from the building not being constructed as designed. And that appears to have been what caused this problem, which went on for quite some time. Can anybody, I didn't see it in the report. My apologies if I overlooked it, but I don't see any accounting for why the building was built the way it was built, why it passed a final inspection, and why we would have granted occupancy based on an entrance to the side, which was completely unsuitable.
Through the chair to you, Councillor McCreary, I'll answer, you kind of started off, but I'll look to building if someone is here from the building department there. This chronological kind of timeline here, you're right, it didn't involve, I'm going to say, those details. In speaking with the building department, it looks like, again, developers, small, medium, or large, sometimes like to make changes and then try to get past staff where drawings don't match. They have to submit a significant amount of drawings, and it is staff that are trying to make sure that these all match. But I'm gonna say this one is one that did get past us, where one drawing is not matching the other. So when a site alteration is looking at the grading, we looked at the grading first. It matched the severance plan. It matched the overall drainage plan, where the builder then went and made that change without updating their grading plan. And the drawings did not match when those were reviewed. So that's something that I'm going to say the building department and development engineering have, I'm going to say, looked at. We looked at it a way that we could set a process in place where now we have to do additional work, additional time to make sure that the approval of that grading plan is now matching what that building footprint and the intent of that builder is trying to achieve. As for releasing occupancy, I would have to defer to the building department on that. That is very specific to, I'm going to say, the Ontario Building Code.
Thanks, Gary. Andy McMahon, Chief Building Official. Through the chair to you, Councillor McCreary. The building permit that was applied for reflected the actual construction of the building and met the building code. And that's why the permit was approved and ultimately occupancy was granted for the building. The issue lies in that the site plan that was submitted for the building permit was different than the site plan that was submitted for the site alteration permits. The layout of the building was slightly altered to eliminate the front door and add a side entrance. But basically the building size and location were the same. The overall grading patterns were the same and drainage patterns were the same. It was really just a change to the layout of that door, and it did meet code. So, it was approved and passed. The real issue arose when the owner of the property wanted to install a concrete sidewalk to that side entrance in an area that was designated to have a drainage swale in it.
I got to say, this is one of the craziest files I've ever seen. Certainly, it's a one-off, but so the retaining wall that you see on the site now, well, unless it was replaced, I haven't seen it since the owner had a permit issued. It consisted of some wooden 4x4, I believe, which was stretched along a series of historic is probably too nice a word for the posts, some metal posts that appeared to have been already in the ground for some other purpose, and then fill was added to it. And I did find it odd that type of construction would be permitted, especially since it's on the property line. Was that the design for that retaining wall? Is it kosher? Does it meet code?
So I believe that old retaining wall you're speaking to is a property line retaining wall. The overall grading plan initially was not to use that retaining wall, and I believe since then they have gone and put a proper retaining wall in to support the homeowners' new wishes of their sidewalk. I'd have to look back in the file exactly if that retaining wall is still there. We haven't done a finished inspection yet, or final inspection since this permit's been issued. We're waiting to hear when it's been completed. With respect to that other retaining wall, again, I can't confirm whether it was even on this property or if it was shared or on the adjacent property.
Yeah, and I may comment. I'll say that, you know, this certainly wasn't anybody's fault, but it is indicative of a problem that we have where we have two departments working independently of one another with, you know, with different managements, having responsibilities on the same site without what appears to be any clear communication throughout the process. And when I asked initially if you know, when somebody comes through the door, there's somebody there to you know, take their checks and tell them all about the process, I really think this is a manifestation of a pretty significant deficit that we have, that there's nobody that has clear-cut overall responsibility for even a project this small. And I'm pleased to see that there's consideration being given to fixing that situation, right? It's not a situation that I know of that occurs a lot, but it's indicative of what happens when you got two separate trains of thought going on. Again, thank you guys for that, and I think we all learned something coming out of this one. I'm not sure what, but I'm pleased to hear that we did. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further comments on 5.1? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Could we get a mover for the minutes? Councillor Carpenter, Councillor McCreary. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? It's carried. There is a notice of motion, which I believe Councillor Utley, you wanted to move forward today, which would require I guess procedurally, we must vote on this if we're going to vote to accept it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe, and I hope Julia is on the line, that the new rules state that an agenda, even a notice of motion, must be on the agenda before the meeting. So I'm asking permission from the task force to introduce this with a motion to waive the rules, and just to introduce the notice of motion, not to read it through or discuss it as a resolution.
Okay. Are you moving that, Councillor Utley?
I'd like to move that, but do I need through?
I believe
Julia,
you need a seconder. Yes.
Do I need to read the motion to waive the rules?
Mr. Chair, I'm the seconder.
Okay. I'll have to look to the clerk. Does this have to be read to be procedurally correct?
No, through the chair, I think his intent has already been stated in regards to this, so you're fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So
thank you, Mr.
it's
Chair.
moved and seconded to add this
It's
to the
moved and
agenda.
seconded, and I, in my rush to get this out this morning, I neglected to put the title of the notice of motion, which is security deposit process.
Okay.
And I'll correct that and send it to Julia, to the task force.
Okay. Any discussion? Councillor Carpenter?
Thank you. Julia, when was this new rule able for us to implement this rule? When did it become active?
Last Tuesday night.
Okay, that explains something else.
Yes, it's very new, very new.
I thought so. So Tuesday night in bylaws, right?
In bylaws, correct, yes.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
Thanks.
I tried.
Okay, I guess we have to vote on this as well. So all in favor?
Do we have to vote on a notice of motion?
You have to vote that we're going to allow you to have it.
Okay,
on.
all right, thank you.
Make it a legitimate notice of motion. And you're not wearing a green shirt, so it's all nullified. Or no, maybe that's not part of it. Okay. So yeah, I guess it's now a bona fide notice of motion, Councillor. Very good. You're the first one to test this new system, I do believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Having tested the system, I guess we've come to the end of our agenda. Do we need 2/3 majority to adjourn, Madam Clerk, or are we okay? We didn't change that, right? We could just adjourn.
You did not change that. You can just.
Okay, good. So having said that, we are adjourned.
Good job, Mr.